The medieval crusader didn't simply march onto the battlefield with a sword at his side. He carried weapons that were nothing less than masterpieces of engineered destruction. These weren't crude hunks of sharpened metal swung by desperate men. They were finely tuned instruments of death, forged by master craftsmen who understood both the science of steel and the psychology of fear. Even today, their very names send shivers down the spines of historians who study them. If you could choose just one medieval weapon to wield on a battlefield, which would it be? The sword, the mace, the crossbow, or something else? Share your pick in the comments. Let's strip away the movie myths for a moment and see these weapons as they truly were. We're not talking about oversized, clunky swords or shields that splintered with a single blow. What emerged in the age of the Crusades was the result of a technological arms race, a brutal contest that pushed human ingenuity to its darkest extremes. Europe, Byzantium, and the Islamic world collided in these wars, trading, stealing, and adapting each other's innovations until the battlefield became a laboratory of death. And the results? Weapons so advanced, so terrifyingly effective, that they reshaped the very art of killing for centuries to come. Think about it. No gunpowder, no high explosives, no modern metallurgy. And yet, these warriors carried tools that could slice through advanced armor, pulverize bones, and end a man's life in a single calculated strike. Compare them to modern combat knives, and suddenly those knives seem like toys from a child's playroom. The archaeological record makes the horror even clearer. Skulls shattered like pottery, bones snapped in ways modern forensic experts struggle to fully explain. Many victims were struck multiple times, their bodies enduring wounds so devastating that it's hard to fathom how they stayed alive long enough to receive them. And standing at the center of this blood-soaked stage was the most iconic weapon of all, the sword. The Crusader sword wasn't merely a tool of war. It was a sacred symbol, an embodiment of faith made steel. When a knight drew his blade, he wasn't just arming himself. He was literally gripping a cross in his hand. The crossguard of every Crusader sword deliberately echoed Christ's crucifixion, transforming the weapon into both an icon of faith and an instrument of death. A swing of the blade could split a man's skull, and in the knight's mind, it was God's justice delivered by human hands. But don't be fooled by Hollywood's oversized, clumsy props. Archaeological finds show these were marvels of engineering. Typically 70 to 80 centimeters long, they were perfectly balanced for single-handed use, capable of both brutal cuts and lightning-fast thrusts. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. Not all swords were created equal. The steel itself determined who lived and who died. In Europe, especially in Toledo, Spain, smiths had been refining their craft since Roman times. Their blades could hold a razor-sharp edge while remaining flexible enough to withstand the bone-crunching impact of combat. To a knight, owning such a blade was the difference between survival and slaughter. Yet even the finest European steel paled when compared to the wonder that Crusaders encountered in the East, Damascus steel. The very name carried an aura of dread. Forged from a material called woots, imported from southern India and Sri Lanka, Damascus blades possessed qualities that seemed almost magical. Their rippling, watery patterns weren't just beautiful decoration. They were the fingerprint of a microscopic crystal structure that made them sharper, stronger, and more durable than anything Europe could produce. Knights who faced them described the experience as nothing short of terrifying. Imagine your finest armor offering no protection as your opponent's blade slides through it with ease, while your own weapon bounces off his. This wasn't only about killing power, it was about psychological dominance. An army facing Damascus steel often lost the battle before it even began. And yet, the sword was only one part of the Crusaders' terrifying arsenal, because as armor improved, new weapons arose to meet the challenge. Enter the mace. If the sword was the weapon of noble knights, the mace was the equalizer, a brutal tool that required almost no training yet delivered horrifying results. Imagine a simple wooden shaft topped with a solid sphere of iron. No finesse needed, no years of practice, just raw, unstoppable force that could crush a helmet like a tin can and leave the skull beneath in fragments. But medieval engineers didn't stop there. They refined the mace into nightmare variations. Flanged maces with metal ridges designed to bite into armor and split it apart. spiked maces that pierced straight through plate and into flesh, knobbed maces that turned a single swing into a cluster of simultaneous impacts. The difference was simple. A sword required precision, skill, and discipline. A mace demanded only strength and rage. And the results were gruesome beyond belief. Excavations of Crusader battlefields reveal skulls cracked open so violently that modern doctors classify them as unsurvivable injuries. These weren't clean, honorable deaths. They were the systematic destruction of the human body, achieved by weapons that turned bone into dust and flesh into pulp. The psychological weight of these weapons was as terrifying as their physical power. Imagine the chilling sound of iron smashing into steel, the unmistakable crunch of a mace connecting with armor. It wasn't just noise. It was the audible signal of finality. For soldiers who heard it, that sound meant one truth. Someone's war had just ended forever. And yet, even this brutally simple tool paled when compared to what medieval weaponsmiths unleashed next. Hybrid creations that fused multiple killing systems into singular machines of destruction. Enter the battle axe. This weapon was the perfect example of medieval innovation. An evolution that combined simplicity, affordability, and terrifying effectiveness. Similar in size to a sword, yet cheaper to forge and far easier to master. The battle axe needed little training to use, but its killing power far surpassed either of its rivals. What made it so terrifying was its dual personality. One side a crushing weight capable of breaking bone and armor through sheer brute force. The other a razor-sharp edge designed to slice through mail, leather, and flesh with surgical precision. Chroniclers of the age tell stories of battlefield horrors, of men struck down so cleanly that severed limbs dangled unnoticed until their owners attempted to move. That was the grisly genius of the axe. Its versatility. It could hook an enemy's shield, drag a knight from his horse, crush a helmet, or seek out the small, vulnerable gaps in armor where death waited. Crusader manuals don't describe the battle axe as a clumsy bludgeon. They detail systematic techniques, step-by-step methods for dismantling defenses before delivering the decisive blow. But medieval warfare didn't stop at perfecting singular weapons. As armor improved, so too did the ingenuity of weaponsmiths. The next leap was nothing short of revolutionary. The poleaxe. No other medieval weapon strikes such dread into the hearts of historians who fully grasp its design. This wasn't just a tool of war. It was medieval engineering at its most merciless. A culmination of knowledge, brutality, and precision that created what many experts now call the deadliest anti-armor weapon in human history. Picture it. You're standing against a knight clad in the best plate armor that money, rank, and craftsmanship could buy. Your sword bounces uselessly off. Your mace fails to find a weak point. Death feels inevitable. And then, into your hands, comes a poleaxe, and suddenly, the impossible becomes possible. Ranging between 4 and 7 feet long, this wasn't just a stick with a blade. At its head sat an axe blade sharp enough to cleave steel, paired with a hammerhead built for shattering armor and bones alike. Crowning it all was a thrusting spike, forged to pierce mail and flesh in one clean, merciless strike. Every inch of it was carefully engineered to counter the defenses of a fully armored man. And here's where its creators revealed their brilliance. The weapon's shaft wasn't left bare wood. It was reinforced with iron strips, languettes, riveted into place to prevent an opponent from chopping it in half. This wasn't decoration. It was battlefield insurance, ensuring that even under relentless blows, the poleaxe remained as deadly as when it first swung. The psychological effect of this was devastating. Manuals of the time described the poleaxe in terrifying detail. It could smash, cut, pierce, hook, pry, tear, lever, and crush. Imagine facing an opponent holding a single weapon designed to counter every move you could make. Even the word we still use today, poleaxed, comes from the grim reality of prisoners executed with one decisive swing to the head. The archaeological evidence confirms it. Skulls split with surgical accuracy, bones shattered, armor punctured in precise weak points. These weren't wild swings of desperation. They were deliberate, anatomically informed strikes, executed by men who understood the human body better than most physicians of their day. And to wield this monster wasn't simple. Training manuals declared it the pinnacle of medieval martial study. Master the poleaxe, they said, and you could master anything. the sword, the dagger, the spear. It was the graduate school of warfare, and graduation meant you could unmake any opponent, no matter their armor, their training, or their experience. Yet the real horror of Crusader weaponry didn't lie in these individual tools alone. It came from how they were combined into systems of death, orchestrated into battlefield symphonies of destruction. And no weapon symbolized this shift more than the crossbow. This invention didn't just change warfare, it revolutionized it. Unlike the longbow, which demanded years of practice and enormous physical strength, the crossbow leveled the playing field. With minimal training, even a peasant could unleash a quarrel with enough power to punch through the finest armor of Europe's elite knights, all from a safe distance. In one stroke, the monopoly of killing was broken, and the battlefield would never be the same again. Medieval crossbow bolts weren't just oversized arrows, they were meticulously engineered projectiles crafted with a single purpose: to punch straight through defenses that once seemed impenetrable. Each bolt head was designed with chilling precision, specialized for the type of target it was meant to destroy. Bodkin points could slip between the links of mail, prying them apart with surgical efficiency. Broadheads, on the other hand, ripped into unarmored flesh, tearing arteries and causing catastrophic bleeding. Even more terrifying were the armor-piercing varieties. These concentrated all their force onto a pinpoint tip so sharp that it could tear through steel plate designed to shrug off swords. The science behind it was staggering. Some medieval crossbows had draw weights that exceeded 1,200 pounds. Enough mechanical power to hurl bolts at speeds capable of reaching targets nearly 400 meters away. Chroniclers of the time didn't exaggerate when they described bolts blasting straight through an armored knight, sometimes with so much leftover momentum that the same projectile maimed or killed the unlucky man standing behind him. But the true danger of the crossbow went far beyond sheer killing power. It was how it reshaped the battlefield itself. For the first time in history, the balance of power shifted. A low-born peasant with minimal training could suddenly cut down a noble knight who had spent years honing his martial skill and fortune on armor and warhorses. Cavalry, once the ultimate symbol of dominance on the battlefield, became vulnerable to the humblest foot soldier armed with this mechanical equalizer. And the ruling powers panicked. The church tried to intervene as early as 1139, issuing a ban on crossbows for use against Christians, branding them as too inhumane for civilized warfare. Yet the ban fell on deaf ears, because kingdoms that adopted crossbow technology quickly annihilated those who clung to tradition. War had entered a new era, and no decree could stop it. This arms race didn't stop at handheld weapons. Medieval siege warfare became a terrifying theater of destruction where engineers unleashed machines capable of toppling the mightiest fortresses. The trebuchet was perhaps the crowning jewel of this era's ingenuity. Imagine a contraption capable of hurling 300-pound stones with enough force to shatter walls hundreds of meters away, and accurate enough to strike a chosen section again and again until it crumbled. But these monstrous machines weren't used only for smashing stone. They were tools of psychological warfare. Chronicles describe trebuchets launching rotting plague corpses, barrels of Greek fire, and severed heads into besieged cities. The goal wasn't just to kill, it was to terrify, to make defenders lose the will to fight long before their walls gave way. What makes this even more astonishing is the precision of the engineering. Medieval builders weren't guessing. They carefully calculated counterweight ratios, angles of release, projectile mass, and structural stresses with a mathematical sophistication that rivals modern engineering. These weren't crude catapults from cartoons. These were precision siege engines, designed for maximum impact with chilling efficiency. So, the next time you watch a movie that shows medieval knights clumsily staggering around in rusty armor while waving crude blades, remember this. They weren't primitive brutes stumbling through a dark age. They were the result of centuries of continuous military innovation. Every weapon, every piece of armor, every machine of war was part of an evolving system designed to answer specific battlefield problems. The Crusader arsenal was more than just a collection of tools. It was a carefully integrated network of destruction. From the symbolic power of the cross-shaped sword to the cold, mechanical precision of a siege engine, every invention carried with it the weight of trial, error, and bloodshed. These weren't just weapons. They were inventions that changed the very language of war. They didn't simply kill. They reshaped strategy, rewrote military doctrine, and laid technological foundations that echoed across centuries. And archaeology backs this up. Medieval battlefields weren't chaotic clashes of steel. They were proving grounds, brutal laboratories where the deadliest innovations were tested in real time. Think about it. Today, we look back with comfort, imagining knights in shining armor and noble duels. But the reality? The gulf between what we picture and what those warriors actually endured is almost unthinkable. We enjoy lives of safety and luxury, while they survived in a world where your very existence depended on mastering tools designed for raw, efficient destruction. The Crusader arsenal is more than history. It's a grim warning. It shows what happens when some of the sharpest minds of an age focus their brilliance not on saving lives, but on perfecting the art of taking them. A legacy that is at once chilling, awe-inspiring, and unforgettable. Now I want to hear from you. If you had lived in that time, do you think you would have had the courage to wield these weapons? Or would you have feared them more than the enemy itself? Share your thoughts in the comments. Before you go, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Vassal Truths. Here, history's darkest truths and most astonishing stories come alive. Stay curious, because the past still has secrets that can shake the present.